Um, so I'm Greg. Hi, everybody. You may know me from IRC as Greg Deck. If you've known me for a very long time, you may know me as GDK, which is what I was at Red Hat the first time. So we have a very loose sort of schedule here, but really the overarching story is we have time together to talk not only about some topics that we want to drill down on, but also on how we're going to do more of this going forward to make sure that we are engaging with all of the folks who make things happen, and we're doing that stuff the right way. So we have a whole bunch of topics that we said we were going to cover, and testing, new modules and extras, the PR process, the roadmap, issue triage, Galaxy, and technical board were the ones that bubbled to the top. So they're the ones that we sort of put in. But if the flow of the day ends up changing or being different, that's perfectly okay. I'm going to do my best just to kick off the topics and say, all right, go. And then basically take copious notes and type everything into IRC so that everything is captured for all of the people in the world who are not here that may not care at this instant because it's 3 in the morning in the US or whatever, but will wake up to care at some point, some of those people. And then so we are broadcasting, but no one's on, that's fine. And recording so that people can replay this stuff after the fact. We're also on IRC on Pound Ansible meeting, which we may or may not make use of in the future. We'll figure that out today. So James, where are you? There you are. Yes. So here's what I would like to do to start with. We've got the test session that's first, and I think that's fantastic. So what I would like for you to do is just to sort of talk about what your plans are for testing, how testing works now, and sort of what's on sort of near-term roadmaps for testing, and so forth. And I'm just going to go in IRC and start taking notes now. Oh, also bookkeeping, talk into the mic so that we're recording things, and you should be able to push your little button, and the little red light should come on, and you should hear yourself in the room. So.
And that goes into Greg's computer.
And then it gets broadcast to the no one who's listening, but everyone who will be watching later. It's you. There we go.
You might need to be a little bit closer as well. No, it's fine. Sorry.
So testing is obviously something that we've been a sticking point for Ansible. There's a lot of things that are really difficult to test for us. Mainly, it's modules. Getting modules tested is difficult. Part of the main reason is that modules do so many things, and especially when they interact with third-party services, we can't go out and sign up for every third-party service that our modules support. So we've tried to, part of the 2.0 rewrite was heavily focused on at least making the core of the code more unit testable, and we still have a lot of work to go there, but it should be a lot easier to write unit tests for as opposed to the V1 code. So really we need to start coming up with better strategies for testing modules rather than just running them all the time. We've talked about trying to mock out things in the past, and I don't think we've really come up with any good ideas so far for modules. And this is really going to be important as we start working on rewriting the modules to support Python 3. So we're going to have to really figure out ways to test things as we're heavily rewriting modules to fix up the syntax for Py 3 and to make sure that they stay compliant with Python 2.4 as well, which is going to be a lot of fun to do.
God.
Yeah. Thank you, Rel 5.
Yeah, I was really excited that we just got rid of Python 2.6. I can't imagine having to try to keep it. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So that's the long and short of it.
What do we have now?
Right now we have unit tests and integration tests. Integration tests, we started trying to cover as much of what we considered like the core criticality of modules, things like file, copy, template, service, some of the other things, integration.
What?
Pretty much core critical modules. So one of the things we were talking about doing is we have the core and extra split right now. And right now there isn't a huge distinction between what goes into core and what goes into extras. So one of the things we talked about, one of the requirements for a module to be in the core repo is to have basically one of the requirements be that those modules have integration tests or some other kind of tests so that they can, as we update them, they, get tested better.
It's a great idea. Yep.
Yeah. Is there any reason not to do that? So what's the cost of not doing that?
Bugs,
And what's the cost of doing that?
time.
So, and that's the trade-off that we're going to be dealing with. So is it possible to basically just pick a time and say, as of today, if a PR doesn't have an associated test with it, we won't even look at it? It won't.
I think that's probably something we should have done a while ago, but yeah, I think we need to start doing that now.
Step one, build a DeLorean.
Yes.
So can we safely say right now that there will be a time at which, and what's the barrier to getting there, right? What's the barrier to saying on this day, we will no longer look at core pull requests unless there's, because as of right now, the problem is if you do that, you have to write the module in the core repo, and then you have to put the test in Ansible, right?
Right.
So is that dependent upon bringing those repos together?
Yeah, well, yes or no. So we had talked about doing the core repo, merging that back into the main repo. That's still on the table. However, as we're talking about moving into longer support life cycles, which is something we're obviously going to want to do with Red Hat, it may be continuing to be easier if we have all the modules in separate repos, and then we can have multiple versions tracking those external submodules.
Does Ansible 3 work with the modules from whatever version, like the matrix of stuff there, right? Yeah.
But that would be more for like the longer term supports, the things that are 2 versions out that are still getting security fixes, but maybe not updates to module utils and things like that. If we have 2 or 3 of those, it would be much easier to have them pointing at the same SHA for a submodule rather than having to cherry pick things to 3 or 4 branches. So
I have a question. Are there good examples and models already in core that can be used as this is the way that you bring new stuff in?
And you're talking about testing stuff?
Right. So if you're gonna draw a line in the sand and say we're no longer taking core modules without tests, is there examples? Is there a goalpost that we can code to?
yeah, the test integration directory.
Mm-hmm. Is that the model you want to carry forward, or do you want to?
I don't see any other way forward right now unless we're going to start mock testing modules, and we don't have a framework for that right now.
Okay.
So if
So
someone wanted to write that framework, I think it would be better. Our integration tests are very slow, they're very serial, so if it breaks up here, you don't know if anything below it is also broken. There's a bunch of problems with it. So if someone wants to write a framework,
and there is kind of a framework in place where in the unit tests we have right now, we do have a couple of unit tests that test the module formatting code, which is pretty much the first step to writing something that would mock out the modules themselves. So that is a possibility.
Ziploader would also probably make it easier because we'll be able to start porting modules to not use the module formatting code. The module will just be a static file, and putting it together will be done
In a different way?
think one of the other things that we're missing there is the ability to do completely on. Is it? Okay, sorry. I think one of the other things we're missing there is the ability to run those things in a very tightly scoped fashion. We don't need to run all of the core module integration tests when you make a PR against a single core module. We need to run the tests for that module. Now, the infrastructure we have right now doesn't make that particularly easy to do, but I don't think it would be that hard to get there. So that, when somebody makes a PR against, against the copy module, or, well, okay, that's a bad example, but, some normal core module that isn't doing a bunch of crazy action stuff, it's not going to be that, it shouldn't be that hard to get it so that we're just running the tests for that module right there instead of running the entire integration suite, or in the case of right now, nothing.
Yeah, I have another question. Is it easy as a developer to run the tests myself so that I can be sure that what I'm submitting is going to work?
Yeah, actually, this is how I run it. I said it's easy. This is how I do it. I didn't say it's easy for me.
Basically, the test integration.
Or that's at least what I meant to say.
In the test integration directory, you can make tests runs everything. But if you also use tags, you can say just run the test for a simple copy.
So talk into the mic whenever you're talking.
So there's a test integration directory under which you have a make file. That make file is what runs the test. So make test runs all the tests, but if you want specific ones, you can add tags. So if you just want to run the copy ones, it'll run the copy ones. If you run assemble. Not all modules are represented that way. Lookups, for example, are all in one test. It's one big row, but we can break that down a bit more.
There's also some problems with the stuff the way it is now around failures, and there are environment variables that have to be set that are set by our CI environment that are not set, I believe, by default still on there. That if certain failures like pipe failures and things like that, if you just run them on a vanilla machine that's not configured that way, you will miss failures. So there are problems. Like
I've never run into that.
Me either.
Any of those.
There's something in the way we run it. There's an environment variable we've got set for Jenkins that's doing that isn't set by default.
No, but I run them on my machine without setting in the environment variable.
You may be missing those failures then if they're happening.
Jenkins environment, I think, is running outside of the major processing network for that's should be outside the scope of that big target.
Yeah. So one of the things I would like to do is to start splitting up these tests to make them more parallelizable. That's a word. May not have drunk enough coffee. Rather than having all of these tags, which if you see the two ways I've got this written, which is with the test flags, environment variable, you can set, basically make everything a make point, a make target rather, and then we could run these more in parallel with J8, and it speeds things up quite a bit. Right? Yeah. Make dash J8 means use 8 threads. You can do this now, but there are race conditions on the way we have like a prepare test task that creates the Ansible _testing directory, and at the end it cleans it up, it deletes that. So if two tests are kind of running at the same time that are both depending on that, and the first one finishes and deletes that directory, it screws up the second one running after it. So fixing that will help the serial problem a lot. Just running -J2, which generally avoids problems, even though I had problems with it last week, takes the running time from like 15 minutes down to like 7 minutes. So it's a pretty good speed up.
So I have a quick question. How many people do you think in module land are running tests now for core modules? How many people do you think are running tests? I'm seeing a big zero.
I know
in the
you
back
do it a lot.
room, above his zero. Resmo does it. Thank you, Resmo, because he's the ideal contributor. Well, in that I don't see anything of his ever break because I don't run it, because I don't run clouds anymore. But so do we all sort of agree that nobody is currently running tests on modules when they check things in generally?
CI does.
So,
Jenkins
but
and
when
Travis,
people make code
Travis doesn't
check-ins,
run any integration tests.
Just build and doesn't work.
We're trying to fix that.
right? So there are almost zero users outside of the very core set of folks who are writing tests that are being run against these modules. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we typically rely on Jenkins to catch things.
Well, and Travis. Travis
And
runs.
Travis doesn't run the integration test, which is a good point because we are trying to work on that to get Travis up and running on our integration tests.
But I guess my point here is we have relatively few inputs from a testing perspective that don't come from the core team.
We have some, but a lot less than we
Right.
would need.
So, and I guess my question would be, how are we going to, because we're all very smart and we've all we all think we're very smart, and we've all sort of been soaking in this test framework. I would submit that we have no idea how this test framework looks because we don't have newbies trying to use it frequently. And when we do, they probably just go,
I've actually had someone working on it recently that has given me earfuls of feedback on it and has been writing things to try and make it easier. And you'll start seeing PRs around that stuff from him. But they're it's not great. It's not a great story, especially coming from some place that has really heavily embraced testing. Like I think it would be great if we can get to that bar of saying like we're not going to accept core module PRs without that, but we got a lot of stuff to clean up in our own house first, I think, before we could say that realistically.
right. And so I guess what I'm asking is, until we make that kind of call, we're not going to have the motivation to fix things as quickly. But if we make that call, there's going to be a whole hell of a lot of pain in a fairly short amount of time. So is there a path where we can sort of start easing people into this? What does that path look like? Because we I feel like we've been in this place where we've all sort of broadly agreed we definitely need better testing and we need more people to write testing. But it's sort of, it has bubbled to this is the thing that everyone wanted to talk about most in this room. And in practice, it's the thing that has slipped to the end of the train pretty much every time. So I guess my question is, what are the pragmatic steps that we can take to start moving little bits of this into the critical path? Right. So, what is the minimum viable testing framework?
I wonder if we can move testing to more alongside the modules. At the moment, you have to make changes inside Ansible. If each module came with its own independent testing code, perhaps even as part of the module, so that if you run the module with some kind of if you've just ran the module, it runs some tests.
Yeah, I've actually considered doing that, embedding the test into like the way we do the documentation into it, and then building it into our hacking module testing script. Add a flag to it that it would.
What we've done.
I would not do that.
I know,
but I would.
hate to.
I would move it to the
Should be
same
in the
repository,
repo.
but I would
Yeah.
not stick it inside of the script.
We
No,
were,
you don't want to be shipping that over to every machine every time. There's people who are already upset about how
You
large the
could,
modules are.
I understand. You could strip it out. But I think the first step is moving. I know.
Language independence.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With zip loader, you could do it.
So can we?
we've already actually started putting some tests with the module, but I think it's been 2 modules until now, and it hasn't caught on. But we're already hosting tests with the module repos.
Can we do testing on the extras modules as well? Like, can we start there as
Yeah.
as
There's a test directory there.
Okay.
Start putting tests there.
So then why don't as a deliverable a quick blog post and a maybe even a video or some sort of screencast of here's how to write a test for a module. Sort of very simple. And this is a thing that we're making optional. We're giving this functionality to increase the stability of your modules, to add tests into your modules. It is optional now with an eye on required in the future to start getting participation as a slow trickle before you open the fire hose.
We have one of those. It's in the test unit cloud OpenStack. It went in 4 months ago. I've never seen it.
I thought we had to.
Oh, right, this is the thing from, what's his face? That guy. Yeah. But this is more of like the unit, the unit testing type of locking a bunch of stuff out and running the module.
Still in the main
cool. But yeah, I think also the being able to do the same kind of integration, like being able to host integration test things in the module structure would be probably.
There's no reason why we can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to separate, especially, the cloud tests, for example, are a whole unit that we can just move over to the core repo, unless we're moving the core repo back in. So I think extras, cloud stack there, that has a good set of integration tests. We can move those over. Yes.
So, and this is one of these things where there are a lot of things that we could do. And at some point here, we have to get to the hard work of deciding what we're going to do. Yeah,
So-
Crab is on the call now. Yay, hi Crab, thank you for coming.
Can I just throw out one thing that I think we could do, that's not that hard, that would be a big, so I think that would be a big step in the right direction here. Define what we want the shape of integration tests inside those two repos to be, inside the two modules repos to be, and what is whether it's metadata based or whether it's just kind of convention based, but how do we map those tests to a module so that we can run those things, that we can get to the point where we're running those things automatically on a module PR. If you touch a module, those tests will run, but we can have Travis do that. So that shouldn't be a hard thing to define. And what was that comment up there? What?
He said something about
It just sounds like a user maybe has a.
Okay, so that's another nice suggestion for something concrete.
I'm staring at the screen and thinking, and I think everyone else is sort of.
In terms of that, that sounds like a great set of stuff.
That sounds like a great set of stuff to define. It also seems like if, in terms of the Travis thing, some of these modules are going to be runnable in Travis and some are not going to be runnable in Travis. So probably also want to make sure we can flag the runnable in Travis / must be run in Jenkins, dichotomy.
Yeah, basically anything that needs an API is not really runnable in Travis.
Yeah.
And root.
Still, I guess the same thing applies, right? Whether it's Travis or something else running it, but at least it can be run automatically in response to a PR against some environment that has the stuff that's necessary to do what needs to be done.
Well, I guess that's actually maybe that's a better way of saying it rather than even saying it in terms of Travis or Jenkins or whatever that is. It's like there's, without getting into like describing a whole meta description language that would get us down into this, developing an entire different product. There's probably some key things like, needs root to be able to test, needs an external API availability to test. There's a couple of things we could probably pretty easily flag out of like, these are the kind of things that this particular thing needs. And then the testing systems themselves, or however we're putting those into Travis or Jenkins or whatever, thing we may, cook up can then actually not fail just because it's like, I'm Travis and I can't run things as root, so your test fails, which means that you're a bad contributor. Yeah.
Well, we do something already for the cloud modules. If the credentials are not there, they don't run.
Yeah.
So adding the ability to say, I need root should not be hard.
Yeah.
And there's no reason we can't stay with Jenkins. My only thing there is that we probably have to stand up a separate Jenkins instance from the one we do right now, because we do tower testing on both. So to open it up to the public, I would want to split it out onto its own Jenkins instance. And then we can get around a lot of the Travis limitations still, although you're dealing with Jenkins.
Yeah. So at the risk of sounding like the person who keeps talking about vaporware, I promise we've actually started actual development work on the thing, but we are working on a replace Jenkins with Ansible project at the moment, which is actually now feature complete in that all of the hard bits have been written, and now it's just writing all of the boring bits. So that's, it's a good place. So we're looking in the next couple months that should be actually something that we can have, it'll be running in at least one place and we can point at it, and then we can, talk about how we can use that here. But there's definitely an urge on our side of the fence to stop using the ridiculous beast that is Jenkins for the task of running code remotely on systems. I would like to run these commands on this remote system. I will now spin up a Java service to do that, to test my Python-based system for running commands remotely on systems. So anyway, that's for anybody who's interested in reading the spec for what that looks like. That's the.
Any Red Hatters familiar with Ravello? G-Bar?
So Ravello is a system for spinning up test environments in different cloud infrastructures.
Oh, that Ravello.
Yeah.
It does not Google well, which is weird because it seems like a word that would Google well, but there's apparently something in Italy.
2 L's.
Yeah, still something in Italy, but I've now found it by saying Ravello Cloud.
Yeah, there's a whole other set of questions, which is what infrastructure can we offer for this testing, which we can consume massive amounts of resources in testing all these things. And my question is sort of on the user side, how do they run these tests before they check them in? And what mechanism can we offer to make sure that what they're running is what gets run? And I guess that's what Jenkins or whatever we choose should be doing. We just need to make sure the convention is run this, test it locally. When you check it in, the same test will run against Jenkins, and this is exactly how you do that.
I really love Matt's idea of getting the system to recognize that only certain files have touched and not to fire off the entire test suite.
Yeah.
That would help immensely. Would make
so is that a so as we start sort of like bringing this into actual requirements, does that feel like a requirement to be able to, because it's like we got all these things we could do, and at the end of the line there is sort of the first, this is our official testing policy that you must follow. And when we get to that day, is this one of these things that's a requirement to get us to that day, is to make sure that the entire suite doesn't run every time?
Yeah, because take OpenStack. Just because you've checked in a fix for Nova doesn't mean you should run every other OpenStack test along with it.
Yeah. Well, especially as that explosion starts happening, we have people, there's some contributors out there that are trying to write some heat modules right now. Not everybody even has that installed in their available cloud. So that's and granted, those are still on the, Brian was saying, from integration test perspective, you don't have cloud credentials. It's not going to do that. But if you have cloud credentials and there are modules for things that not all clouds have, then we're back into the thing where you as a local contributor just ran something, you did all of your things right, and you still got red things on your screen yelling at you.
Mm-hmm.
The one exception would be, well, two, file and copy, which are used by other modules, and soonstat. Those would have to run multiple modules when you update them.
Although those
only when there's an action plugin, and that's kind of testing the overall system. So I don't know.
But if you change the file, you need to run template and copy and an archive and basically all the ones that use it.
True.
I'm saying
I see what you mean.
There's a couple of exceptions.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't keep us from doing it for the 99% where that's not the case.
No.
Right?
Yeah. Like
Be aware.
But yeah.
And you can, if we restructure the tests so that they're more make targets, then we could add dependencies in the make file for those, and trigger other tests that way. I don't know how much easier that would be, but
would it? So
Make's not the greatest thing for it.
Yeah, I was gonna. I mean, like I love make, right? Like I agree with you, and I think that doing that as make targets would be fantastic. I also think that a lot of the more hipster of the contributors out there may not know how make works, and I sure.
Like Grunt, but in 300Ks, not 300 megs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's exactly like Grunt, except with less JavaScript and more sanity. But yeah, I figure maybe it would be worth time looking at some of the things that can do, like test discovery lists and stuff like. I mean, like I don't necessarily think we want to use the actual. We definitely don't want to use the actual Python unit test discovery protocol, but like something that's like that for this, so that you don't have to not only write the module and the tests, but then also go add a make target that then terrifies you because you've got to remember to put in tabs, and I don't know what that looks like. I love, we keep talking about replacing our discovery driven stuff with make files. So like because make works well.
So it's something as simple as you drop your test into a subdirectory that has the name of the module in it, and then our test target says, okay, well, I look in this directory, and sure enough, there's a file there. I'm going to ahead and run it to test it.
We could write a script that generates make file snippets for people. We could call it like auto.
No. We aren't in the U.S., so we don't have guns to shoot ourselves with. Please, let's not go there.
Yeah. I did have a feature request. Somebody wanted the ability to run playbooks in parallel. So that's pretty much what make does. So if we added that feature, I really didn't want to add that feature.
Jesse, thank you for putting all of these into that format, because I think that.
Jesse, thanks for putting this into that format, because I think that may well be what. Because I'm putting my project manager hat on, and I'm like desperately searching for something that feels like a deliverable. Is that a deliverable? Maybe that. No, it doesn't sound like it. We don't know yet. Oh, that could be. Oh no, we don't understand. But I feel like thanks to Jesse for putting things in this, because that looks like stuff we could do. And his first suggestion was, to me, just have something that really spells out how things are currently expected to work and make people try to do them, I guess is, one thing we could do is, and this applies not only to modules, but to core code as well, is really seriously privilege things that come in with tests. I don't know how to do that, but have some mechanism where if there's a PR with a test, it gets somehow fast tracked, because that's a persistent pain point across the repos. We've made some strides, I think, in modules because frankly the bar is lower and we can sort of experiment more. But in the core, it's been a pain point. How do I get this PR through? And if we could draw some line in the sand and say, no, really seriously, we do have a testing mechanism, however imperfect. And no, really seriously, if you do have a test associated with this check-in, we will move it to the front of the PR queue. No, really seriously.
I have been doing that. That's how Resmo gets all his stuff in.
Right.
So I like one of the things that Django does, in that they have flags on each one of their tickets for has tests, has docs, needs improvement, has code versus just an issue, low hanging fruit, things like that, so if somebody has just a few minutes, they can easily filter through and look at the pull requests that are more fully developed, that have been reviewed, that are more complete, or are fairly trivial.
Can we get a waffle state for that? I don't know.
I had considered that actually. We started playing with waffle.io. I don't know if anybody's seen it. It's like cardified GitHub issues.
What the hell is a waffle state? That's like without context. That sounds very odd.
I tried to go look at the waffle thing, but I guess I'm not privileged enough to be able to, like, it doesn't show up in my, if I go there, it doesn't show up in my list. Nothing shows up for me for that, which I found weird. I was expecting it to just like there to be an Ansible thing as it searched in
my biggest problem with it is there's so many issues that I hit rate limiting on GitHub since it's an external service. Yeah. So I've got my fingers crossed for GitHub since they responded to that open letter with that nice follow-up that they'll address some of those issues. The greatest thing I like about waffle.io is it allows me, I've got all 3 repos added into one view.
Into one thing,
so I can now see all issues at once again rather than having 3 or more tabs open.
Yes. There's a thing from, I agree with Jesse in the IRC, by the way, the how do we reward them without implicitly making them required, because there's that, and I think actually everybody in the sort of Ansible core team does a really good job of not sticking on like, oh, there's a written policy that says you must do this thing, so go fill out these forms and stuff, which is great. But yeah, like, because there's times when like a pull request, honestly, like writing a test for the ridiculous comma fix you just did is ludicrous, and we don't have the pencil pushers currently, but if we start getting into that, one can imagine a place in a year and a half where we accidentally grow pencil pushers, and that would suck.
No, let's keep common sense.
Yes, please. And thank you for having common sense, by the way.
Didn't know I had sense.
So
have we solved things?
I think I didn't realize we had tests in the module repos already. I haven't been watching modules all that much. So I think
remove the trailing S. We have tests.
We have a test.
Let's start reorganizing the tests. Let's move all of the integration tests we have into their proper module repos. So that they're
core also, or do we just want to do extras?
Core also, because it
gives that
be up in
structure.
the air if we.
What about things that have action plugins? That's where it gets dicey.
Doesn't matter. The tests still run it regardless. So having it live where the module is rather than where the action plugin is, because we're not testing the action plugins directly.
But then if you're making a change to the action plugin in the Ansible repo,
Are you running the test?
Well, I guess you're still going to run
Still run the action
you'd run
plugin,
it then.
run it.
Yeah, no, that should be fine.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the breakage case there, but I think it's since you're pulling both.
It's the action plugins that run multiple modules. Like if you change one of the leaf modules, then the other ones that depend on it may not run.
Oh, but no, those are 2 different things. I don't think that's the which tests do I run thing. It's the combination of the 2 repos together at testing time. With the one code, making sure that you don't get into the case where you make a change into the repo and you don't wind up testing the change until it lands and you attempt to run the test on the thing that consumes it, and then you realize that you broke it a week ago. But I don't think that's actually the thing that'll happen here, because you'd still run the tests for the core modules that use the action plugin when you make the Ansible pull request.
Yeah. Things from it. There, we're checking out Ansible, and then running tests from that.
So the tricky part is that we have to be sure that we're checking out the correct submodule version.
Yeah. But that's solvable.
Okay, so we're 40 minutes in. We have some other things we can cover here.
I have one small related question to this that I don't know why I didn't realize or think about it until sitting in this room here. But when there are some external things that have API access, such as, for instance, the OpenStack modules, is there a good way to like get for say me to go get my hands on some free cloud resources that can test those and get those credentials to Ansible folks so that they can at least go into the private Jenkins to be run when there's credentials?
Yeah, that we can do. I'm afraid of the one of putting it into a public repo.
Yeah.
Because I can.
Yeah, all of the very afraid of that.
Miners.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Great.
We could use those. We
Cool.
could run it from Jenkins. I don't know. Actually, I might be more resources than I have. But I'm allowed to.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Maybe OpenStack is a bad example for that, but most of the projects like GitLab or CloudStack have a Docker image where you can run. We can set up Docker images and run the test against the API like that. So CloudStack in terms of CloudStack, they provide a Docker image which has a simulator on it, so you can just spin up that Docker image container and then run the test against that. So maybe there's some other APIs which can be tested this way.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been writing NetApp modules for the last little while, and they have the same thing. They have a simulator and an API web services proxy thing that sits on top of it. There's no reason we can't throw the thing into a container and use it for that. So
yep.
I think there are a lot of things that fall into that category.
Yeah. We can flag the test as long as it's available, and then we can just pull the Docker image in and do it. And we just need to figure out which services have that and then automate it.
You can even do some regression, like a new version of API or service, and then run the tests against these various APIs versions.
We just need one to start as a model, then people can contribute once we have that one running.
We have a contributor on IRC who asked a question.
Oh, IRC.
Yeah. And no, that is the window I have open. And her question is, can we get a list of the existing tests no matter where they are currently? Is that all centralized in a place? We can.
Right now, they're all under, with the exception of one, under test in the main repo. If we're going to distribute them across the repos, that's going to be a bit more fun. But I guess we can always make the makefile in the core be able to read the test from the other repos through.
So would this be a top level tests directory in every repo, or
yeah?
Yeah. And that goes back to, so we need to define a convention for, target names or something so that we can say, yes, it's module tests dash module name or whatever it is. If it's not going to be metadata based, at least convention based, so that we can say, let's, somebody touched this module, let's go run the tests for it. If there's no tests, okay, fine.
But this might be one of these derailing things, so tell me to go away if this is too weird of a question. But so we have in the shade repo, which is like a couple of layers down removed from things, but in the shade repo we have playbook style integration tests that we run to make sure that when we make changes to that, we're not going to break Ansible. But those have actually also wound up being good tests of some Ansible things as well. I'm not really sure if there's a good way to report those back other than what we're doing right now, which is just pinging somebody on IRC. Is there or if that's a generalizable problem, or if that's just because we're weird? If there's any things that we should think about there in terms of how to tell people if they're doing things in a similar pattern.
I don't know how easy it is for us to run those tests, or
it's pretty easy. I mean, you have to have a credential. You have to have the same thing with the other integration tests. You have to have an API credentials to run against, but other than that, it's the same thing.
I mean, for now, it's worked okay. I just don't know how it's going to scale.
Yeah, I was more curious if that seemed like a pattern that anybody else would, if it's specific to us, or if that's something that somebody else might also want or need to do a similar thing that we think about generalizing. But it sounds like no.
It's going to be 4 or 5 different teams that are going to be able to do that at the scale that you do. I mean, people are working on big clouds or big APIs that have a big team and already have an open source community that does all this. It's not going to work for piecemeal stuff.
Yeah, fair. Cool.
Okay, so we're sort of, so we got a lot of things we've talked about. We've got a lot of things that are sort of like pseudo action items, things we could do. And so I'm going to ask the question that I'm probably going to ask several times today. And that is, what is the group that's responsible for moving this forward? Who is in that group, both inside of the Ansible fence line and outside of it? And what is the sort of governance mechanism by which we will turn this conversation into action items?
Basically, who's it?
Yeah.
Well, obviously it's me.
Yeah. If the answer to every question today is James saying, well, obviously it's me, then I will not consider this to have been an unqualified success.
I just meant the overall. But yeah, I think we have a few really good ideas so far.
So at some point here, I'm just going to sort of walk the laptop around the room so Crab can see everyone who's here.
I can take care of separating the tests to each repo, moving the integration test to each module where they live, and probably creating the overarching make file that can now detect that.
All right. Well, so I'm going to turn into captain action item here for a little bit. So who's it? So action. And I didn't have time to get an IRC bot into this channel, so I'll just transcribe all this stuff later. Okay, so Brian owns what? Can you say all that again, and so I can actually type it in? No.
I'll separate the test, put each test with the modules in its repo, and then figure out a way of making the main make file run those tests and discover new tests.
Those tests. Discover new tests.
The big thing we're lacking with modules is probably unit tests. A lot of them are very simple and very small, but a lot of them would benefit from unit testing. Most of what we have is integration testing, which is a bit black box. But we should have a structure that allows for both.
Actually just had I don't know if just had a thought on some of the external API things in terms of a unit test. So there's a thing we've been so the requests guys, one of them, Ian, wrote a thing called Betamax, which basically hooks in as an adapter to the requests module and records the API interactions with something and puts them in a file. And so then if there's a recorded thing, subsequent runs will run against the recorded version of the API entry rather than actually doing the live things. I've got a to-do list task to figure out how to use that myself for just the shade library, but it seems like maybe investigating how an Ansible test runner could provide the capability for injecting some sort of, I hate saying dependency injection, but sort of talking about like injecting around how a module is executed so that you're Betamaxing a requests object out from it for anybody that's using that library for API things might be a.
Well, the stuff that's using the internal Ansible, we could mock open URL pretty easy to do that and then just diff the results with what we expect.
Yeah.
It gets harder when we're using third-party libraries, Photo, Shade, or something else.
Yeah.
Then that depends a lot on that library and being able to mock that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to depend on what we want to test. Thank you. So, for instance, like Docker, we could mock Docker and then not have to run any containers or a Docker server to host those containers and stuff. But the Docker API is one of our major pain points. It changes and the module isn't updated to account for the change. So if we're mocking the Docker library, we're going to miss out on all those changes and whatever. And so it's not going to.
You are in fact testing that you still work with the thing that doesn't work anymore.
Exactly.
Good for you.
So it's going to be hard to do it, but if someone wants to spend the time doing it, it's not totally a bad thing, because having tests at that level is good. It's just that we got to test beyond that level for a lot of things as well.
Yeah, we can verify that we didn't change, but that does not mean, especially with Docker and Docker PY, each one changing at their own pace, like every 5 minutes. It's, yeah, I know.
Yeah. And unit testing, things that have action plugins are not going to be easy.
Actually, that might be easier because the action plugins would be easy to unit test.
You'd have to unit test them separately.
Yes.
But not as a unified thing.
Well, that's kind of the point of unit tests as opposed to integration tests, is that you're testing a small isolated chunk of your code.
Robin asked in IRC again the question that I asked the first time, which is, who is responsible for continuing to poke at / wrangle the improved testing stuff process?
I was going to take that because something that's been on my back burner for a while has been rewriting. Rewriting the integration test to use 2.0 syntax, doing things with blocks so that we can catch errors and it doesn't just stop executing in the middle. Like basically we can run everything regardless of whether errors happen. Because that's one of the more annoying things with the integration test right now is sometimes if there's multiple errors in there, getting it to run from beginning to end is a pain.
Also, now we can set ignore errors globally and then just capture the results and deal with that.
Okay. So the next question is, how often do we meet, have some way of updating the community on what's going on, who's capped an action item? Like you've said yes to this. So my question is going to be, how do we, what does our community stand-up process look like? Let me ask it that way. How do we, or what community development process are we looking at here? Because, and here's another thing that I want to get accomplished today. The core team does heroic work at all times, and I want you to be less heroic. And so I want to start pushing more of these things to a place where if someone in the community feels like they can pick up an item, we've got a way to do that and hold people accountable so that it's not just you doing it. Because again, if it defaults to you doing everything, we'll continue to grow the team, but yeah, and we'll keep having this meeting. But is there some regular meeting that we can have? Is there some sort of, is there a Trello board that people can look at for this stuff?
One of the
what
things
does it look like?
We were doing and keep meaning to start back up is our weekly community meeting. So I think we need to start that back up. Whether we do it just via IRC or if we continue trying to do Hangouts or BlueJeans or whatever.
Well, this is nice too. All right, well, so my action item is basically to continue asking this question and then to say, hey, did we do that thing? So I'll take it upon myself to do that since that's, my job.
We also need to figure out what time frame we want to do it by because we already have a ton of things on our plate for 2.1. So
yeah, that's right.
Looking at doing this for 2.2.
That's right.
It's right next. Yeah. For the community meeting in particular, I think we should start that up really quickly because it was really helpful when we were developing 2.0 to be able to set aside 2 hours every week and, address the community wants this thing in and people are showing up to work on it at the meeting and tell us that this is important to them. And it kind of was like, okay, we can take a break from all this stuff that we think is important for 2.0 and put something in that someone else thinks is important and make sure that we get a balanced release out.
Yeah.
Thank you for volunteering to run those meetings, Toshio. I knew what you were really saying there, so I just went ahead and volunteered you for that. So, all right. Do you have an objection? No? Good.
I'm a dictator, just letting you know.
All right.
request?
Actually, you need it for
Can I
meetings.
request we run them at different times of day because they're
No,
hard to get
you
to
can't.
from the UK.
I'm on the Pacific West Coast, and you're going to have to deal with that. You European people are screwed.
Listen, what are we going to have to do to get Europe to change their time zones to be more amenable to Silicon Valley?
Excuse me, you're here where they invented the time zones.
It's like there, it's like right there.
2 p.m. normally.
A question though, what times work better for you guys? Does it work better if we're during business hours for you or non-business hours for you?
And it's entirely possible that, you know, we do have a crap ton of topics we're covering today. I mean, I could see that we might have a community meeting and there might be a different meeting of people who like to do testing stuff and other people who want to do other things.
Right, and this is where we start to get to. So, as you know, the two people at the front of the room may have been responsible for running these kinds of things in the past for this big project called Fedora, and we sort of we're going to get to the point where we're going to have these things that look suspiciously like special interest groups or things like that, and we may want to consider whether we are at the point where we need that kind of structure, right? When do and we don't want to overwhelm ourselves with structure, but we want to have just enough so that we're actually facilitating and improving what's going on. So I'm not going to commit to anything here except that I'm going to keep asking that question, and I'll occasionally say, hey, we haven't talked about testing in a little while. What's the mechanism for that? Are we doing it enough? And so forth. And we'll be using Ansible Meeting again. I guess I'm going to go ahead and register this with Freenode so that we properly own this channel and can use it for this kind of thing. And we'll get a bot in here and all that stuff.
I'd just like to advocate for rotating meeting times.
Rotating meeting times is a thing we will commit to doing.
I was going to suggest like 1 week do it really early in the morning, the next week do it kind of late in the evening, and
then occasionally make you folks get up in the middle of the night to feel everyone's pain.
You assume we sleep.
Oh, that's right. That was a foolish assumption, actually. The problem is that'll cut right into your most productive time. It's 3 a.m. This is when I'm getting shit done. Sorry, now you have to have a meeting. Oh. All right. Is roadmap next?
Well, there were 3 suggested things.
Oh, we said we were going to do roadmap testing, and roadmap was technically first, but that's actually a good segue to roadmap. PR process. Let's talk roadmap. Hey, Jason.
Yes.
Perhaps you would like to rock the mic and tell everybody who you are and why you're so awesome.
Hello, everybody. I've been here. This is like exactly my 1 month anniversary at Ansible as the manager of the core team. And one of my first mandates from T. Kramer over there was to get a roadmap put together. I'm Newt McCurr on IRC. And T. Kramer asked me to put a roadmap together, which is now up on GitHub in the Ansible repository under roadmap. I know that's a really strange place to put that. I put a lot of creative thinking into that. And so this is the first time I'm sorry, what?
It's community.
Right. This is the first time we've published a roadmap in this manner. And what I tried to describe was both what we Crab asked who Kramer is. Tim Kramer is the VP of engineering for all of Ansible Tower and Core Crab. So sorry about that. So we put it up in sort of, it sort of reads like this is exactly what we're going to do, although I added some notes to the top because really it's also, a lot of it's based on feedback we've already gotten, but I was hoping to get some feedback on the roadmap itself. I've gotten a number of emails from community members that I've started responding to, even a couple of volunteers to start working on some of the VMware modules. And so this is going to become pretty much part of our standard process for any major and minor release. We won't have roadmaps for sub-minor releases. Is that what we call them?
Bug fix releases.
Bug fix releases. Because that doesn't seem necessary. I guess that's about it. Do you have it up there?
I was gonna say, can you bring it up on the shared screen?
Okay, I'll get it up.
I can find the URL in GitHub.
GitHub Ansible/tree/roadmap.
Yeah, I don't know about other people. I don't have wireless, so I can't see the thing.
There it is.
I posted it in IRC. And the Etherpad is.
There it is.
Yep, there it is.
And Robin, you might post that URL in the Freenode channel. So a lot of the big stuff that we're really trying to work through. So the target date for 2.1 is the end of April. And that's sort of based on the team's best estimate of what they think they can get done in terms of roadmap stuff, and also continuing to respond to requests and bug fixes and all that sort of thing. And we're also hiring more people. So, if you know people. Anyway, that was shameless. So the big stuff we're focusing on for 2.1, we're starting to try and basically finish up and go post beta with most of the Windows stuff we already have, add some Windows stuff. Matt Davis, who is here, and I have no idea how to say your IRC name. Nitz Mahon. Okay, so it's fairly phonetic. We'll be leading a lot of the Windows stuff. He's transitioning from the professional services team at Ansible to the core team full time. So some of the Windows stuff will take a little while to sort of ramp up because we're still trying to get him fully transitioned. The networking stuff, I don't know if most of you saw, but we released a sort of technology preview based on the 2x code branch with a whole bunch of networking stuff by Peter, is Peter in here?
No, he's in the other.
Okay, he's in the partner summit. And so a big goal is to make all of that stuff stable and part of 2.1. VMware is another high priority. I think I said that there. Okay. The downer for us is that Charles Paul left the company to go, I think, to Japan. And so he was our VMware expert. And so we're trying to shuffle some people around to figure out how to get this done in this time frame. So this one's sort of internally at risk, although I had some community members reach out and volunteer to possibly take some of that on. So that'd be awesome. A whole bunch of Azure stuff. Refactor the Docker module is a big one, and basically get it to parity with existing Docker capabilities at the command line. Upgrading some of the cloud stuff is community stuff, so that's sort of on me and Greg to kind of run around and kick at people to update some of their modules and various other things. Toshio is going to be doing, I think, all of the zip loader stuff. Is that right? That's listed here?
Unless Brian says that I'm stupid and takes stuff over from me.
Okay. All right. Well, Toshio will be doing this with the caveat that if he's stupid, Brian will do it.
So don't you have someone who can tell you what you're going to be doing now? Isn't that the guy speaking?
Yeah. So I'm in charge of zip loader and all.
This looks like it's on the roadmap to me.
Yeah. I should have put your name next to it. It was. I actually took it out. Diff support in the modules. Something we did promise for the last, I don't know, couple releases that we're still kicking down is remerging the core stuff. Jimmy, I don't know if you have I think that was your call, and I don't know.
Yeah, we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier.
Oh, okay.
Whether it was in fact going to happen.
Okay.
Just because of the structure with the life cycle and stuff.
Cool. And lastly is non-technical stuff, but really, I know everybody here has had some frustration. We've got, I think, north of 1,000 pull requests right now. And we've got to sort of get through that and clean a lot of it up. So really on me and possibly somewhat Robin and Greg, but mostly me, is to define the process for, thank you, for reviewing PRs, getting them in, publishing better documentations and documentation and how-tos for committing and contributing to the project. So I know we've been behind on that stuff, and that's a big effort of mine over the next couple months to both triage and get a lot of the PR sort of backlog sort of cleaned out and create a better process for doing them. Questions, comments, concerns, things that are, go ahead, patently obvious that we missed?
I don't see anything on there about open sourcing Tower.
Right.
That's not on the actual roadmap, that's on the Tower roadmap.
In fact, you can
noted. Jesse is the first guy in the room to beat that guy.
Thanks.
You can ask the guy right behind you though, because he's the Tower man.
One thing to note that the roadmap doesn't include a lot of the currently open PRs. That does not mean we're ignoring them. This just means this is stuff that we think that we need to concentrate on and add for 2.1. But there's plenty of other stuff that's going to go into 2.1 that is not on the roadmap. It's just that it's all over the place in PRs.
Hey, Greg, I don't think are you scrolled down all the way in the IRC window?
No, he's in the next split.
Oh yeah, we're all in different. Dope.
Yeah, I just got kicked off the hotel internet myself. And then the other question for this group is just, is this a decent way of going about communicating roadmaps? And I don't know.
I think it's great for, given that it's an infinite number, an infinite amount more of a roadmap. I think it's a great step.
We can only go up from where we were a week ago. Okay.
Yeah, so it seems like it's a great step forward, and I'm sure at some point in the future we'll be like, oh my God, we should have.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, my goal here, and this was one of my big wish list items here and at other places that I've worked in the past year. I think this is sort of a good first step. That I have other, can we have actual dates maybe associated with this in the future? But I think this is amazing and an excellent first start, and delighted to see where this goes in the future. Thank you.
Cool. Well, if you have questions or comments, other concerns, things you want to change, just find me on Freenode Newtmaker.
Well, I guess we're done with roadmap, so keep doing more of that. Oh, good. Yeah, well, so I can't see that. All right, so Crab says, I think the approach of creating a milestone and opening issues within it is not a bad way to communicate a roadmap, provided that the P1, P2, P3 priorities are revised to reflect actual operating priorities. Roadmap.md would also work if it's maintained, if it's maintained, if it's maintained, if it's maintained. He typed that once, but I said it 5 times because I think it's important.
Yeah. And the P1, we actually got rid of. Some may have noticed. I think we didn't do it all the way on the modules, but in the main.
Oh no, I put a bullet in everything that wasn't P1 or P2. There's nothing in any module. The bot now basically says, if I find something that's tagged P3, P4, P5, it just says, no, it's not, and throws it out.
Yeah, so we got rid of those labels because they weren't really meaningful. The P1, P2 is still very meaningful to us, and those are the things that get our focus. Triage is on the list of things to discuss later, but we try and honestly triage things at the priority we think they belong.
Yeah.
And we have been assigning milestones lately for stuff that we think will make it into 1. We did the same thing for stuff that we thought would make it into 2.0. Was not always perfect, because some stuff that we had flagged for 2.0 is now flagged for 2.1 because it never made it in. But we are doing that. We just don't have more than the next release in milestones. And I think having more is just going to make us go crazy on assigning stuff that we'll never get to.
All right, well, I'll wait for my table wires. I didn't want to do that, but I may be forced to.
I've been playing all morning, so.
I'm using a service that I'm hipster, I see. No, something I'm paying for.
All right, so I think that's basically it for roadmap, and we'll see.
Roadmap.
Yeah, we'll continue to see how well this goes, but this is something that the community has been asking for a very long time, and we now have someone whose job it is to make sure that we're doing that properly, and just beat the hell out of that sucker if he doesn't keep up with it. That's the important thing. What do we have next? Let's look at PR process for Ansible. And actually, Serge, do you mind sort of, because when we talked about all this on the Ethernet, on the Etherpad, Serge was the one to say, yeah, maybe you're starting from a set of completely flawed assumptions, and maybe we should talk about our entire PR process and whether it's based on the right thing and so on. So you have the floor if you want to expand on that right now.
I actually didn't have very specific other ideas when I talked about it. It just occurred to me that a lot of the things that were enumerated on the pad sounded to me like they had a focus on working on the GitHub workflow in general. And it just occurred to me that it might be, if you take that as a starting point, you might perhaps be overlooking other ways of working, other workflows, other tools that might be interesting. That's a general idea.
Yeah, and so I'll talk a little bit about what tools we're using now and sort of how we've gotten there. You know, as many projects grow in an ad hoc way, Ansible also sort of grew in an ad hoc way. And we were basically looking for whatever mechanisms were easily at hand to help us go through the backlog of PRs that was rapidly stacking up. And so, you know, a lot of the current process was basically built in self-defense just to have some mechanism. And really, it's just what we have now is any mechanism to allow any sort of meaningful triage of PRs that are currently coming in, to say this is good enough that it needs to be considered in the shorter term. This doesn't have enough data associated with it, so it can wait. And whatever process we have now is really just sort of still that sort of thing. And a lot of what we talked about from a testing perspective, I think speaks to where we would actually like to be. I think that where we would like to be in the long term is a place where the default thinking is that, oh, hey, it's now actually responding. We would like to be in a place where there is no manual commit, I think, ultimately. I think we'd like to be in a place where something gets checked in, it goes through rigorous tests. You know, we've got a code review process a la Garrett, something pretty like that, and there's no need for hands-on review. And it just flows through the pipe, and then it gets tested, and then it gets an upvote or whatever, and then it just gets pushed in. That is where I would like to be. I have no idea how we're going to get there myself. And so what we have in the meantime, from a process perspective, we have a bot that runs on modules that, and I'm happy to show people where that is. And we run it in a sort of semi-regular way. I haven't run it in a few days. I need to run that later today. Where we basically just walk through all of the PRs and try to figure out what state they're in, whether they're waiting on a contributor to fix something, whether they need to be rebased, whether the person who is responsible for the module says, this looks good to me. Thanks, Jesse. I think, yeah, what I really mean to say there is I have no idea how that magical fairyland actually works. So I just hope that it will happen one day. And the process that we have right now is for modules, because modules are a thing that it is easy to say someone in the community owns this, right? We can, even if it's a core module, we can say, here is a person in the community who knows this module better than we do because they use this technology more than we do. And that makes it easy to assign ownership. We don't have anything like that in Ansible itself. And so it really comes back to, here are the handful of people who we think are well enough qualified to merge something like this. And so
we used to, and Greg and I have talked about this, and I'm sure a lot of people remember Ansible, but it did a fair job. It was just incredibly fragile and was always breaking down and needed to be restarted. And then when we split the repos out to 3 repos, it was never designed to monitor multiple repos. So we then had to run 3 instances of that Ansible. So it was that much more fragile. Had to run it in a screen session. So basically you had 3 screen sessions running. It was just a pain. I had to restart it like 5 times a day. So we got away from using it, but we would definitely like to go back towards using that. We want to revisit fixing that up and possibly merging it with Ansible bot.
Is there a reason why? Is it available? Can other people look at the code? Is there a reason why a community couldn't contribute to it?
There is no reason from my perspective.
Yeah.
So we've got different bots right now running. The one that I run every day is out of the Ansible bot repo. So
It's already linked there.
Yeah. All right. So it's already linked. And basically, and actually I'll go to it.
And we still have that repo private, so we could make that public. I thought we had made it public.
Which repo?
The other bot.
The other bot. Okay. So this bot. So this is the. Like I wrote this, so sorry. I really shouldn't write code, but I did out of self-defense. So we've got a list of maintainers, and it used to be that I asked people to, and this is something who I don't remember who, but someone told me that what I was doing was the wrong thing, and I said no, it's the right thing, and then I discovered that it was the wrong thing, so I changed to do the right thing. And the right thing is to have external files that basically show all the current maintainers of record of everything. You will note that the OpenStack things have many maintainers because Monty told us all the people who would actually maintain things, so thank you for that. And basically, we've just got a bot that walks through the core and extras modules and does our. The goal is to have this bot be fully automated. Right now, it's semi-automated because there are still corner cases that we're fleshing out. And so this is a good point at which to switch to what Crab says here. And he says, I think Ansibot isn't a sustainable solution. More people actually looking at and closing PRs is what's really needed. And I completely agree with him. So the question that immediately follows is, who can do that? And sort of the glib answer is anyone we decide who can do that. We have mechanisms that allow the reason that we have this bot at all is because GitHub doesn't have the sort of granularity that is necessary to say, in this gigantic repo, these are people who own this chunk and these are people who own that chunk. That's something that you can't do in GitHub. In GitHub, you either have commit access to the repository or you don't. And so in module land, we've sort of engineered this mechanism to allow people to have pseudo commit access, where if they say ship it, we say okay, and then we've sort of fast tracked their changes through. But we don't have that in Ansible, and we've got a lot of PRs that have sat out there that could probably be closed by someone who can look at something and say this doesn't have all the things that are needed, or this is a simple change and it passes my test, so I'm going to commit it.
There's also a problem of scope. Modules, you break a module, you just break that module. Ansible, you break something there, you're breaking everything.
Right.
I'm always way more terrified with those patches than with the modules. I break it, I'll fix it tomorrow. Somebody will yell at me. Meh. Everyone in the world will yell at me if I break it.
Yeah. Speaking as a person that's broken the file several times, it's
several.
Even before starting to work for Ansible, I broke file.
But yeah, PRs are easy. Issues are hard. Issues with very little information, no playbook to reproduce it. Those are the things that you can spend a couple of hours going down a rabbit hole trying to reproduce. Or just
I'm actually going to flip this around and say issues are easy and PRs are hard, because with issues, if you do them the right way, the answer is GTFO with this bullshit bug report. You've put literally no data in here. Come back when you've put any data in here. Goodbye. We don't even know what file is affected. Go away.
Those are
right?
easy issues, but then you get issues where there is a playbook to reproduce it, and it is a valid bug, and
Right.
it still takes an hour or two to track down sometimes what's causing it and get a proper fix in.
Yeah, we've had several of these recently where somebody goes like, hey, this module is broken and here's how it's broken for me. And we're like, wow, we can't reproduce this in any environment we've got. I don't know how to help you, but I recognize that like your output, you're not just fabricating output. This is broken for you.
Exactly.
I salute you for actually even looking at issues. And I think a lot of the problems are that people don't, like right now when issues come in, we sometimes are able to route those people, but not everybody is a conscientious maintainer. I'd also like to point out that issue triage is the subject for this afternoon before we go down this giant rabbit hole, because I think what most of our discussion about is supposed to be trust versus lists of names.
Yeah.
And if we can expand trust.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because as Crab points out, Ansible is frequently broken, and we're all still alive somehow.
Sorry, Crab. I keep forgetting about the mic.
Well, and Devel can break. It just shouldn't be broken often or for long. But it is Devel.
Right. Do we have a better feeling about how many people are production running off of Devel? I know that was a thing in the early days, but now with a lot of maturity in the releases that Ansible have had, do we still feel that that's a valid strategy that a lot of people are doing production runs off of Devel?
It was at one point 25% of our users based on surveys. I think our last one, did it dip below 10? I don't remember what the last survey said. But
The thing is that the percentage has gone down, but the number of people might have gone up.
Yeah. So
Sure.
there is still a significant number of people using Devel.
And that's actually good, because when it breaks or when it behaves differently, we get an alarm early on.
And those
Right, it's good
that they're an early adopter.
Yes.
So they're not.
Right. That's the thing. Like early on, because like such a huge majority use Devel, the feeling was it has to work on Devel, and I'm expecting it to work on Devel. Where you want to see that shift a bit to where you have the early adopters using Devel with the understanding that it's going to break sometimes, and your duty as an early adopter is to, one, not get foaming mouth upset that it broke, and number two, report that it broke and help find a solution.
And Crab does that. Crab sends us 1 million patches for fixing things. So thank you, Crab.
So I will turn on my microphone. I will turn on my microphone so the Crab can hear me. I also kind of run, I quasi run Devel-ish in production, but that is because of because inventory, like the inventory plugin stuff is in the tree, and updates to that, like the inventory plugins are a little bit in that weird gray area where they actually don't get pip installed by Ansible in the first place. So I kind of have to grab the Git repo to get them. So I might as well grab the Devel part of the Git repo just for those. So that's a whole other topic that I'd love to chat about over beer or something like that. But like other than that, so it's basically like 2.0 like from pip, but then a couple of other things from the Git repo from develop.
Yeah, they install with packages, but we're still trying to figure out how to do this with pip.
Yeah,
because pip is not very good on install these other files that are not really part of Python.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk about it earlier with testing, but Tower relies on the inventory stuff very heavily as well.
Yeah.
So we have recently talked about bringing those into a proper testing environment themselves, and to start trying to standardize the inventory plugins so that every inventory plugin doesn't have to re-implement caching, things like that. So
yeah.
Creating, kind of base inventory stuff that inventory scripts can build off of.
That'd be really cool.
Things like that, and then get proper testing around them. So
I'm pretty sure I've implemented caching poorly.
Well, and it's also very hard that each inventory has a different caching mechanism. One thing I was thinking was leveraging the existing fat cache and have all inventory plugins use that.
Yeah.
Or use it automatically so none of them have to use any caching.
Yeah. That'd be really cool.
So I want to talk a little bit about a conversation that Crab and I had back channel a few months ago, and I just want to talk about it from a context perspective and sort of part of why this question matters to me. He said, hey, I've got this list of all of these PRs that I think are either stale or bad or both, and could you please close these? And I said, okay. And then I sort of went through and then got sucked into my day job and ended up not doing that. And then he said, what the fuck, dude, I gave you this long list of things and you didn't close most of them because I understand you have other things to do, but also, could I please just close these? Could I have the access to just close some of these things? And so there's this thing where GitHub is awesome for sharing code and really bad for sharing issues and pull requests and responsibility around those things. And so splitting off so we've got a lot of PRs. Some of those PRs will be merged, and we can talk about what the strategy is to get those PRs merged. But there are a bunch of PRs that I think sane people in the community can just look at and say, you know what, that's not going to be merged. And right now we've got a ton of PRs out there that we don't really pass judgment on one way or the other because we don't have time. There's the trust to say yes, but there's also the trust to say no. And just distributing the trust to say no might be a thing that we should consider doing. And I don't know exactly what the mechanism is for that, but there's people
are pretty conscientious, I think, generally. Like if you hand people a great amount of responsibility, people try to not screw it up generally, and sometimes often try harder than the employees.
I think focusing it on responsibility is really important because like the Jenkins folks will just give you commit access to the Jenkins repos with like you just ask and you can have full commit access to everything, and like they don't ever take it away. Like there's no feeling of extra responsibility that comes along with that. It's just like, yay, we're an open community and anybody can do what you want to, which is one of the reasons that Jenkins sucks and it fails all the time. And so like I think that like the doing it so that it's like maybe being open about it and trusting people to do things, but like making it clear that there is a trust here, and if you're a bad person, then maybe we'll learn how to not trust you, which is hard. It's really hard to step up to a community person and revoke their access. Like that's a terrifyingly like blunt thing to do to somebody that we mostly don't like to do. But I would love it if we would do that because that allows us to be more trusting of people who are doing the work.
About rejecting PRs, this hasn't happened often, but once in a while somebody opens something and 2 or 3 people in the community says, no, you're crazy, and give it a -1, I basically, read over and close the ticket immediately. Normally just quoting the explanation, or sometimes disagreeing and saying like, no, this also helps with these corner cases. Because a lot of the problem with Ansible is that we try to support reality, not what is actually nice to have or the best way to manage machines. It's supporting what's out there. And yes, I have nightmares about CSH and fish because of this. So it becomes difficult because sometimes somebody's looking at this and this is crazy. And they'll say, okay, we need to close this. But then somebody else is like, but we really need this. And then you have to look at it from several angles. So I don't know if it's that easy of just giving people the ability to close, because a lot of stuff will get closed and a lot of people will be angry because they actually need it or it's actually useful for part of the community. But other part of the community sees this as, oh, this is ugly and it's bad and we shouldn't do it. But the other people are stuck in environments that they can't change and they have to act this way. So it becomes a balancing act. But again, if you see something crazy and you put a -1, I will see that and probably close the ticket.
Did we not see crabs 4,000 things that we
I went through most of the list. I closed a lot, but there's a lot that I also left open. I mean, he commented in a billion tickets. I don't know how he slept in like 2 weeks. And I went over all of them. It took me longer than him. But everything he commented on, and I closed a lot of those tickets, but a lot of them I left open because maybe they still needed to be rebased or fixed, but they were valid cases or cases that I could not decide to close that easily because, you know, people need to work in the world they're in. They can't make it perfect and then work.
So how many PRs have been open for a very long time that we're still sort of deciding on?
Quite a bit, especially since we've been concentrating on bug fixing. I don't know. We have in the main repo, 300 and something. I'm guessing that at least 100 of them are pretty old. There should not be much older than a year because I went on a bender last August and closed everything that was older than a year, either by merging it or by closing it because it had become redundant or was just going to get accepted. But there might be a few now that are a year and a few months. But most should be within a year.
Yeah, the oldest one goes back to March of last year, and it is still marked as needs rebase. So anything that old that,
March of 2 years ago. If you're looking at a Galaxy
you're right.
requirement.
It is 2016, not 2014.
Yeah, and there's
so 2 years ago.
Well, and there's this is one of the reasons we have. This is one of the things the bot does is closes things that people aren't acting on, right? So.
But some of those things that the bot has closed, we actually do want, and they need to be fixed. Just people have not had the time. And I've made a list, and not many. Many of the ones you closed were irrelevant, but some of them actually do need to be fixed.
Yeah, well.
Should we just give Crab commit access?
So that's the sort of subtext here, and it's what we're like. Who has commit access and who doesn't, and why? That's the who outside of the Ansible core team has commit access and who doesn't and why.
And my other question, this might be a dumb question, did this come up in Fedora land and how did you handle it in Fedora?
In Fedora, we didn't have GitHub.
Yeah. All right, dumb question.
I wrote a system there because, so in the old days, we just, were able to give people commit access as they were trusted and they could commit to everything in the repo. And then at some point in time, we decided that we didn't want everyone to commit to everything. And then the whole repo got shut down and everything had to kind of get middlemanned in. Then we wrote software in order to let people, so it was a back and forth. GitHub, we can't write the software to do this stuff very easily. So we're stuck up, in phase number 2 instead of being able to get to phase 3. So we're a small enough group. I agree with where I think Brig is going, that we need to, just decide on some social conventions. we're going to tell people you have commit access. You can do a whole bunch of stuff, but we only want you to be, doing these triage stuff things automatically. And then if you want to get your PR committed, go through the normal channels of talking to us and we will merge it. And I think we can trust people to do the right thing in these circumstances.
Yeah, I think it's really easy. We could very easily say you can have commit access. You just can't commit your own PRs. Yeah. Your own PRs have to be reviewed by somebody else. And that would...
So would you want to do that for Ansible core module? Because most of the time they are pushed without review.
Not which ones, because we have a kind of good PR process where if the owner of it... Sorry?
Does the core team follow that?
Yeah.
So all
well, the core team, I see what you mean. No, the core team, no, we don't. I fix things and I push them.
Sometimes.
If I'm like, is this sane? I'll post it in our internal Slack channel and be like, hey, somebody take a look at this. Is this insane or does this look right to you guys? So we use our best judgment. It's just when it comes to outside the core team, we can't track what everybody is committing all the time at the moment. But we can very easily say, oh, this person submitted this PR and merged it immediately. That's something that they shouldn't do.
No,
on the other hand,
for sure.
There are areas where I think that some people should be able to merge their own PRs from the community. I mean, we have modules and extras. We have a contributor that cares a lot about it. They've proven that most of the time their commits are good, and if their commits break something, right away there's a bug fix. If we identify these sorts of people, I don't have a problem with them committing their own PRs. But I think it's just like we establish rules for different things, different categories, and we say, you are in this category. Go ahead and merge your own PRs. If you make a PR to something in Ansible or something in someone else's module or something, then we should get that reviewed. You know the rules now. Go forth and do the right thing.
It's sort of like Jesse's sort of point up there about the Red Hat employees, not Red Hat employees. The underlying question seems, is it possible for someone to become a member of the core team without becoming an employee of Red Hat?
Yeah. So who has that access now, and how did they get it?
You have access?
I have access, but I don't use it because I was asked to not use it. Yeah. So,
which is a social norm.
It's a social norm, but I would say that because I'm still in the category of I shouldn't actually commit my own, PRs, then that's still we're on a step to that process, and maybe one day we'll get there. And I'm not like that's not if we stay in that state for forever, I'll be fine. But
yeah, I believe it's you. What is it?
Civil,
and who else?
And it's me, Civil. There's one other person, I think. I remember when I could probably look at my email history, but
I forget.
That's Civil.
Sorry. Yeah.
Civil is just like Civil is worth multiple people.
Basically, he's doing triage today that we're not. He's been closing. No, it's definitely, and I would trust you to do more than that and close other PRs and do other stuff. I don't know if you have the time or.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing is I want to but yeah, that's a. I've used the access once, which was to revert a thing I accidentally merged. But yeah, it's like, oops, I've merge access and clicked the merge rather than comment button. Crap.
That's actually happened to me several times. So it's not only that core team has the direct commit access, is that sometimes that merge button's in the wrong place for the.
Eric Johnson and Sam Kotler, they have external access.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, earlier I was talking, obviously modules, we have owners, they +1 things, and we pretty much, they get the ship it label and we just merge it if it looks sane.
Modules is easy, and I think we have a process that mostly works. The core team is always the gate, but there's a very clear fast track, even for people who want to merge their own PRs, and I think that's fine. I think that works okay.
So earlier I was more talking about the main repo, the main engine.
Yeah, that's right. which is different because there's more risk, there's more exposure, something can break more things. But again, you're breaking these things in Devel, and something that can be broken can be unbroken. We still have a release process that is fundamentally different, and it's not like we're offering to backport things to stable directly from the community, which is something I presume we would not do.
Well, that's the problem. We can't really restrict people from merging to stable or elsewhere.
Yeah, we can. We say, please don't do that. And that's the thing. Anything. So, Crab mentioned this on IRC, and I'll say it again. It doesn't make sense to optimize a system against bad actors if we know all of the actors in question and can establish a reasonable level of trust and just say, these are the things we want you to do, these are the things we don't want you to do. Because if they do a thing that we tell them we don't want them to do, that's a self-resolving problem that happens exactly once. Unless we think the thing they're going to do is like terribly destructive, and I don't really think that's an issue with anyone we'd be considering.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of that would be that's weird and unrevertible in a sane way is somebody